Now let's begin with the second part. As Jonathan joins the two other gulls and flies up to heaven, he realizes that his body is growing bright and gleaming too. His new body feels the same, but flies much more easily than more surely than his old body can ever did. With half the effort and twice the speed, he pushes himself to new speeds. He is sad to realize that his body too has limits to what it can do. In heaven, Jonathan thinks there should not be any limits at all. Jonathan wants to be limitless. When he is given this new body, he believes that it will allow him to transcend the limitations of his old one. But it does not. Jonathan does not realize that transcendence depends on the unification of mind, body, and spirit. As the clouds break apart, Jonathan's guides wish him happy landings and then disappear. Jonathan is now flying over the sea toward a jagged shoreline. He can see a few seagulls uh, up ahead, but he is stunned by how few seagulls that there are around. He thinks heaven of, ought to be full of gulls. Jonathan also notices that he is feeling very tired. He knows that gulls in heaven never supposed to be tired. As he proceeds closer to shoreline, he feels his memories of life earth blurring and falling away. The gulls come in to meet Jonathan and help him land on the beach. As soon as he gets to the shore, Jonathan falls straight to sleep. Now, Jonathan is now entering a new realm of being. Doing so is evidently taxing and disorienting for him as he falls asleep almost immediately upon arrival. Although Jonathan does not know where he is, what certain is that he is one of just a few gulls in the realm. This suggests that Jonathan is even more special than previously realized. As the days goes as the days go by, Jonathan realizes that there is as much to learn about flight in this place as there had been on Earth, but things are slightly different. All round him are gulls who think the same way he does. The most important thing to each of them is to reach out and reach out and touch perfection in flight. All of the other girls here spend every hour of day practicing flight. As Jonathan uh, joins the other girls, he finds himself at times forgetting completely about his old life and his old flock, remembering them only now and then and only just for a moment. Now, Jonathan is overjoyed in a place where he is at last accepted for who he is and is surrounded by like minded girls who support and challenge him. This demonstrates that Jonathan, despite his loner tendencies, never really wanted to be on his own. He always wanted to just be welcome part of a loving, supportive whole. But his old flock could not provide that. One afternoon, Jonathan asked Sullivan, his instructor, why there aren't more gulls in this heaven. Sullivan replies that Jonathan is a one in a million bird, and the most of the gulls in the heaven came to it very slowly. Sullivan believes that every bird in this heaven has perhaps gone through many lives before they realized that there was more to life than eating, fighting, and gaining power in their flocks. He believes each bird here has lived 10,000 lives, and that birds will now choose their next world through the things they learn in this one. Sullivan reveals that he believes that Jonathan learned so much so quickly back on Earth that he only had to live his one life. So Sullivan has seen a lot of birds come to this realm, but feels his new pupil, Jonathan, is something special. In explaining to Jonathan that it often takes a lot of time for gulls to reach this plane, Sullivan lets Jonathan know just how far his inquisitive nature, individuality, and self determination have taken him. However, back home on Earth, these qualities all seemed like immeasurable burdens that rendered Jonathan outcast and alone. One night, up on the shore, Jonathan approaches Chiang, the elder gull of his new flock, whereas on Earth the elder gull of the flock was enfeebled by age. Chiang has only grown stronger and more capable as he as he advances and ages. Jonathan confesses to Chiang that he suspects this world is not actually heaven. The elders smile and congratulate. The elder smiles and congratulates Jonathan for learning. Um, Jonathan asks if there is no such place as heaven, and Chiang tells him that there is not. Heaven, he says, is not a place or a time. Heaven is being perfect. Just as Jonathan was different from the other gulls back on Earth, Chiang too is shown to be different kind of leader. Chiang's confession that Jonathan and the rest of gulls in the realm are not actually in the heaven makes Jonathan realize that he has yet to achieve perfection. However, for a gull like Jonathan, who enjoys setting goals and pursuing himself to new limits, it's likely comforting to know that he still has work to do and things to learn. Chiang says that Jonathan will last begin to touch heaven in the moment that he touches perfect speed. Perfect speed, however, is not flying at a certain numeric speed. Numbers are limits. And perfection has no limits. Perfect speed, according to Chiang, is just being there. Chiang then vanishes and reappears 50 feet away in an instant. In another millisecond, he reappears beside Jonathan, commenting that perfect speed is kind of a fun. Now, Jonathan's idea about achieving new goals in speed and aerobatics are shown uh, to be not exactly right. Chiang insists that perfect speed is not actually about perfection or beating a record or becoming the best. It is about approaching one's goal holistically and calmly with a state of mind that one has already accomplished uh, perfection and unity. Jonathan is dazzled completely by Chiang's skills and asks how far Chiang can go. Chiang replies that he has been uh, every, uh, everywhere, and Jonathan asks if Chiang can teach him how to fly like that, and Chiang agrees, saying that the two can start practicing now if Jonathan wants to. He tells Jonathan that to fly as fast as thought, Jonathan must first know that he has already arrived. Jonathan must stop seeing himself as trapped in a limited body and instead must realize that his true nature lives everywhere at once across space and time. Now, Chiang's doctrine is not one of training hard in pursuit of a goal. Instead, it is one of teaching oneself, however slow, to accept that goal is within reach and always has been. This Zen or transcendental approach to the world reflects popular cultural touchstones of Bach's time and demonstrates his preoccupation with metaphysical aspects of life. As the days go by, Jonathan tries very hard to learn to fly like Chiang, but cannot move even an inch from the spot where he stands. Chiang reminds Jonathan that he does not need any special kind of faith. He needs simply to understand. He just simply needs to understand. One day, Jonathan realizes in a flash that he is a perfect gull. He closes his eyes, and when he opens them, he has traveled alongside Chiang to a completely different shore. Chiang comments that Jonathan needs some control, but has at last done it. The key to the instantaneous transportation flight is this self-assured realization that one is perfect already. It is not about meeting the goal of accomplishing a certain kind of flight, but rather trusting that one has had the ability to do so along. This speaks to Bach's interest in the synchronicity of mind, body, and spirit, as well as the idea that through such unity, all things are possible. When Jonathan returns to the original shore with Chiang, the other girls congratulate him. Jonathan demurs, though insisting that he has much more to learn. Sullivan, however, congratulates Jonathan on having less fear of learning than any gull in 10,000 years. Chiang offers to help teach Jonathan how to fly to past and to the future. After Jonathan masters time, Chiang says he will be ready to fly up and at last know the true meaning of kindness and love. Now, this particular passage, establishes that it is not Jonathan's skill or talent that makes him special, but his lack of fear and his determination. He's just like any other seagull in terms of his physical abilities, but he is also able to turn away from fear and determinedly pursue innovation at any cost, despite any obstacles. A month or so passes, and Jonathan learns at a tremendous rate. As the special student of Chiang the Elder, Jonathan takes in completes new ideas as fast as a computer. One day, however, Chiang vanishes in thin air. His last words to Jonathan are, "Keep working on love." Jonathan is special, and as he quickly learns complicated skills, he proves just how determined he is. Chiang, he is very proud of Jonathan, that is his pupil, but his final words do not concern technique, skill, or triumph, but rather love and empathy. As the days go by, Jonathan cannot stop thinking about Earth. As Jonathan learns more about one kind of about love and kindness, he yearns to go back home. He knows that at last he was born to an instructor and to pass on the truths he has learned to other girls, especially girls who might have been made outcast for speaking truth. Sullivan, however, has his doubts. He asks Jonathan why he thinks that others would suddenly listen to him. He implores Jonathan to see that he should focus on helping girls in this new realm rather than trying to go back and influence his old flock. Jonathan agrees to Sullivan's advice for a while, but even as he trains new birds who come to the world, he continues longing for Earth. Now, this shows how Jonathan's goal is not or never has been betterment only for his own self and achieving perfection for perfection's sake. Chiang's final words about love are shown to have affected him greatly. He wants to share what he has learned with his flock, even though they have been outcast him. He still loves them and he wants to help improve their lives too. Jonathan shows himself to be truly selfless here and more interested in the good of the collective than he previously seemed to. At last, Jonathan tells Sullivan that he feels he must go to Earth. Sullivan tells Jonathan that he will miss him, but Jonathan replies that their friendship should not depend on their proximity to one another in space and time, but rather their feelings for one another. Sullivan bids Jonathan goodbye, and Jonathan reassures his friend that the two of them will one day meet again. Now, Jonathan is an enlightened one. He is enlightened now and he knows space and time cannot hold him. He has transcended the physical by achieving unity of his mind, body, and spirit, and he is able to traverse the realms of being and consciousness with ease and confidence. Back on Earth, a gull named Fletcher Lind Seagull has just been outcast to the far cliffs. As he flies, he thinks how unjust his flock has been. He knows there must be more to life than flapping around from place to place. Fletcher laments that the other gulls cannot see the glory of flight. A voice appears within Fletcher's own head, warning him not to be too harsh on other gulls. In casting Fletcher out, the voice says, "The gulls have only hurt themselves. One day they will know this." The voice urges Fletcher to forgive his flock. Now, Fletcher's worldview and experience seem parallel to Jonathan's pre-enlightenment days with the flock. Fletcher has been outcast for his curiosity and as such is angry and ashamed, but still he is determined to strike out his own and discover more than the narrow life that he has been leading. Fletcher sees a brilliant white gull appear at his wing. He wonders what is happening and whether he is dead. The gull asks Fletcher if he wants to fly. Fletcher replies that he does. The voice asks Fletcher if he wants to fly badly enough to forgive his flock and one day return to them with the intent to helping them know. Fletcher softly says he does. The bright creature next to him, who is Jonathan, returned to Earth, tells him that his lessons will begin right away. Now, Jonathan selects Fletcher as his first pupil, not just because he sees potential in him, but because he sees echoes of his own past in Fletcher's present. Fletcher is outcast, indignant, and ashamed, but is still determined to succeed and express his individuality. This draws Jonathan to him across space and time. Now, with this, we come to end of part 2. Now, let's begin with part 3. Jonathan circles the Earth's cliffs, watching as his new pupil, Fletcher, flies through air. Fletcher is strong, light, quick, and best of all, he is determined. Despite all of his fire, however, Fletcher struggles and often falls and tumbles through the air. Fletcher gets down on himself easily, wondering whether he will ever learn to fly as well as he wants to. Jonathan is good teacher, though, and reassures Fletcher that with enough practice, he will be great. Jonathan is helping Fletcher to be his truest self and embrace his individuality and drive towards innovation. Jonathan's singular goal is to help share the things he has learned up in the other realm with curious, motivated girls back on Earth. Here we see, Jonathan seemed to be finally achieving that goal. 3 months must have gone by, and now Jonathan has 6 other students, all outcast. Jonathan explains to his pupils that flying is a tool that girls can use to grow closer to expressing their true nature and putting aside their own personal limits. Jonathan tries to teach his students that in breaking the chains of their thoughts, they can break the chains of their bodies. But his students are easily exhausted and unable to break through. Jonathan now has exactly what he wants: a group of curious, lonely pupils whose individuality can nurture and whose individuality he can nurture and whose self determination he can help to foster. But he is having a hard time. A month later, despite his students' slow progress, Jonathan tells them that all this time he has come to return to the flock. One of his pupils, Henry Calvin Siegel, insists that they are no longer welcoming among the flock. They are outcast and cannot force themselves back to the group at home. Jonathan insists that each of the girls, however, is free to go where they wish and be who they want to be. With that, he takes the sky and begins flying towards the flock's home grounds. Now, Jonathan believes in his students and in the message that they have collectively committed to, even though his students do not have faith in themselves. Like Chiang, Jonathan does not ask his students to have faith. He simply asks them to recognize that they are already free, capable, and perfect despite their perceptions of their shortcomings. Jonathan's students watch him fly away in turmoil over whether or not they should accompany him. They ultimately decide that if they are not a part of the flock, they do not have to obey the law which keep them from it. Moreover, they do not have to obey the laws which keep them from it. Moreover, they want to be able to help Jonathan if there is a flight upon his return. Together, the 8 students take to skies and follow Jonathan eastwards. Jonathan's students no longer feel any allegiance to the flock they came from. The allegiance they feel is to Jonathan. They are united in this emotion and fly off in support of him and his vision in spite of their trepidation. The birds, led by Jonathan, fly speedily and beautifully to the shore where their old flock is gathered. They land on the sand in front of the flock and see thousands beady eyes staring at them. Jonathan begins critiquing his pupil's flight, knowing full well his old flock is watching him intently. Some of the younger girls of the flock whisper among themselves admiringly about the outcast girls flying, but elder girls sends a message throughout the crowd: any girl who speaks to an outcast is himself outcast. Now, Jonathan and his pupils now show up to the shore of their old Fox territory, Flock's territory, prepared to confidently, shamelessly bring their innovative ways of thinking to the reluctant birds. The elder, sensing the threat to their flock's tradition, tries to ensure that his flock will remain true by threatening them with being outcast, the greatest threat to a gull, despite the freedom it offers. The flock begins turning their backs on Jonathan, but he does not seem to notice, and instead begins training his own pupils directly over the beach, encouraging them to fly as quickly as possible, as quickly as they can. Pupils who had never shown before give outstanding performances. Fletcher Siegel conquers a complicated slow roll, and the following day, as the public practice continues, manage a triple cartwheel through the air. Jonathan catapults through the air with his students, guiding and encouraging them. With the rest of their flocks, the rest of the flock is huddled miserably on the sand. Now, in the face of being shunned outright, Jonathan continues with his teaching as if nothing strange at all is going on. He is so committed to spreading his message to the flock, however reluctant they are to hear it, that he ignores their desire to turn away from him and instead focuses only on improving his pupils' flight. After the flying is done, Jonathan and his students gather together on the shore and he lectures to them about his ideas. In the night, a circle forms around his circle of students. Other curious girls from the flock, shy and nervous to deviate from the norm, but helplessly curious as to what Jonathan has to say. So, Jonathan's message finally begins to get through the flock, despite the elders' attempt to shield them from Jonathan's new and radical ideas. Jonathan and his pupils have been back for a month when the first seagull from the flock reapproaches their group and asks in earnest to learn how to fly. His name is Terence Lowell Gull, and though he knows he is already rendering himself outcast in speaking to Jonathan and his group, he joins them. Kirk Maynard Gull joins their group the following night, helplessly showing a broken wing to Jonathan and asking how he can ever learn to fly with such an impediment. Jonathan insists that with his group, Kirk Maynard is free to be himself and that nothing will stand in his way. Jonathan proclaims him a free gull, and with that, Kirk Maynard spreads his wing effortlessly and takes to the sky, surprised and delighted by his own triumph. Now, here we see that Jonathan is shown to perform miracles which seem divine. In reality, he is just showing the gulls how to believe in themselves and how to transcend the physical through unity of mind, the spirit, and the body. Jonathan's ideas, crazy as they may seem, are shown to work on even the self-deprecating of gulls, and this triumph must appear to the rest of the flock as incredible, nothing short of magical. By sunrise, 1,000 gulls have positioned themselves apart from the greater flock, listening to Jonathan as he speaks of the nature of being, the glory of freedom, and the poisonous rituals, superstitions, and limitations that can stand in the way of true liberation. The other gulls are afraid of abandoning the law of the flock, and some express concerns that they will never be able to fly like the gifted and divine Jonathan. In response to Jonathan insists that he and his pupils are no more special than the others. The only difference between the two groups is that Jonathan's pupils have begun to understand what they really are and have begun to practice it. With each passing day, the crowd of gulls who gather to question, idealize, and scorn Jonathan and his pupils grow. So more and more members of the flock are attracted to Jonathan's message because they have seen the physical results of his doctrine take hold. Though some are afraid to break with tradition and go against the grain of the flock, Jonathan allows his method to speak for itself. He becomes a controversial figure, as beloved as beloved as he is hated, but has succeeded just by getting the other girls riled up in his mission of bringing innovation and other ways of thinking to the traditional and the stunted flock. One morning, Fletcher reports to Jonathan that the word in the flock is that Jonathan is perhaps the son of the great gull himself. Either that or he is 1,000 years ahead of his time. Jonathan sighs, realizing that to the flock, that he is being set up to be either the devil or God. Fletcher muses that Jonathan and his pupils are merely ahead of the fashion. Now, Jonathan has grown more humble as the time has gone by. He does not want his message to be misinterpreted or glorified. He just wants to spread knowledge to those who want it. One morning, during practice, Fletcher narrowly misses striking a young bird on its first flight. To avoid slamming into the youngster at 200 miles per hour, he diverts his path into a solid cliff of granite. The rock is, to Fletcher, a giant hard door to another world. He awakens. He is adrift in a strange sky. The voice within, the one he heard on the first day he met Jonathan, speaks to him. He realizes that the voice is Jonathan. Fletcher is surprised that he hasn't died, and the voice answers that all Fletcher did was change his level of consciousness. Now, here, Fletcher has a near death experience, but and simultaneously an experience of mind and body united, transcending his physical form. The fact the fact that Jonathan's voice, um, who guides him through the experience, seem to imply that it is because of Jonathan's tutelage that Fletcher has been able to transcend the physical and enter this metaphysical space at all. The voice tells Fletcher that he has a choice. He can either stay on this new level, which is quite a bit higher than the one he has left, or he can return to the flock and keep working with them. Fletcher says that he wants to go back to the flock. The voice tells Fletcher he can go and urges him to remember that one's body is nothing more than thought itself. So like Jonathan, Fletcher makes the choice to return to earthly flock and complete the duties which he feels towards them rather than ascend on himself. This suggests that Fletcher may go on one day fill Jonathan's shoes. When Fletcher awakens back on the shore, a crowd has gathered around him. Some proclaim him the son of the great gull. Others say he is a devil who has come to break up the flock and try to peck at him and harm him. Jonathan appears over Fletcher and asks him if he would like to leave the squawking flock, who have quickly seized on the idea that he is devil and turned against him. Together with together, Fletcher and Jonathan transport half a mile away. Jonathan wonders aloud why it is so hard to convince Bird that he is free. Fletcher is astounded by how quickly the two of them moved and asks Jonathan how he accomplished the shift. Jonathan tells Fletcher that, like everything else, the maneuver takes only practice. Fletcher, having selflessly chosen to come back to Earth, finds a rather hostile welcoming committee upon waking up. This it shows, it serves to show how group think functions and begin to set the stage of mediation on misinterpretation of doctrine. In this case, the flock is split over how to interpret Fletcher's reanimation, choosing to focus on what it means and assign a value to it rather than simply take it in the miracle of the fact that it happened. By the morning, the flock has forgotten its insanity, but Fletcher has not. He asks Jonathan how it will be possible to love the flock when they so angrily turned against Fletcher himself. Jonathan tells Fletcher that it takes practice to see good in each gull and to help them to see it in themselves. Jonathan says that Fletcher has become a leader in his own right. Jonathan wants to leave and allow Fletcher to take over, helping the other girls to see the light. Jonathan tells Fletcher that Fletcher does not need him as an instructor anymore. Now Fletcher must be his own instructor. Now Fletcher's near-death experience has at last, at least in Jonathan's eyes, prepared him to the next step in his journey. Jonathan wants his pupil to fly on his own, literally and figuratively. This conflates Jonathan with his pupil's teacher, Chiang, what left Jonathan when he was already to be a leader. Jonathan's body begins to shimmer in the air and become transparent. He begs Fletcher not to let the others spread silly rumors that he is a god. He urges Fletcher to look with his understanding, not with his eyes, in order to see the way to fly. Jonathan vanishes, leaving Fletcher alone on the shore. As Jonathan departs the earth, he makes his wish for his legacy clear. Bach, in the pages that follow, Bach will chart how Jonathan's humble request is to be remembered as just another gull will be denied. Fletcher reluctantly ascends to the sky and faces his brand new group of students. He is devastated by Jonathan's disappearance, but begins the lesson anyway. He urges his pupils to understand that Seagull is an unlimited idea of freedom, and each gull's body is nothing more than the sum of his thoughts. The birds who thought they would be learning about flight are confused by Fletcher's lesson. Seeing their disappointment, he moves on to the practical part of the lesson, realizing suddenly that Jonathan had never been more divine than Fletcher himself. As Fletcher looks at his pupils, he sees them all as they really are and loves them what he sees. So Fletcher never really quite believed that Jonathan was divine, but he always saw his mentor as peerless and in some ways untouchable in terms of talent and skill. And here, we realize, here Fletcher realizes that Jonathan was all along just a hopeful, sometimes scared girl like him. Fletcher is uncertain at first what he will be as good as a teacher as Jonathan was. But here it implies that his love for his students will allow him to successfully continue what Jonathan started. Now with this, we come to the end of the third part. There is actually the fourth part has been added to the novel or novella recently, but that is not included in your syllabus. That is why we will stop here. And before actually stopping, I would just like to revise. Now this novella, when it was published, it became a bestseller, and it was one of the bestseller. It is actually read widely, and it talks about many themes like deviance, learning, failure. It talks about uh, individualism and collectivism. It speaks about innovation versus tradition. It talks about self-determination through mind, body, and spirit, and also how the doctrine can be misinterpreted. Now, these are the things which these are the themes which with the novella deals with. I hope you all have understood. Um, I will stop here.